Esports Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of THAT Esports Podcast. I'm Goldenboy, and I am so happy that you all joined me for the fifth official episode, because we have a special episode with Zoe. The fifth episode of THAT Esports Podcast. This has been such a fun project to take on. I've really enjoyed it. And also want to give a shout out to anyone who came up to me at the DC homestand that I just emceed and hosted this past weekend for the Washington Justice, that, you know, spoke kindly about the podcast and how much they enjoy it. So thank you once again. But yeah, let's go ahead and just dive right into it. Firstly, make sure you give us a follow on Spotify. Also, leave a review and rate on the Apple Podcast app, as well as Google Podcasts, and wherever you decide to listen to podcasts. And also subscribe on YouTube, because I post a video version of the podcast. It's waveforms, it's nice, it looks pretty, so I put that up there on the podcast when it releases every single week. So again, check us out on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Spread the word, share the love. So another thing I wanted to talk about real quickly, some housekeeping, is that I will be releasing the episodes of the podcast on Thursday now, partly because Foreheads, which is my other podcast with Bren, Josh, and Sideshow from Bren, Josh, and Reinforce. Oh my god, Reinforce will kill me. Of the Overwatch League. I released that, and that actually, you can check us out on YouTube there at Foreheads, and it goes live on Sideshow's channel each Wednesday. So I decided, because this is an independent podcast and it's 100% ran just by myself, I could just move it over to Thursday. I don't think it's going to really affect anything. If you have any reaction to that, feel free to let me know. I'd love to get your feedback on that. As I had mentioned previously, it just came back from the DC homestand for the Washington Justice. I had an absolute blast. It was so fun to be able to get back on the mic and MC host for the team. I did it in Philly, and I had a chance to do it again in DC, and it's really just awesome. It's so fun to do. The crowd, the hype, everything. Unfortunately, the Justice couldn't pull out the wins, but those were some insanely competitive games. I mean, Roar Shatter at the last minute was I just flew out of my seat. I couldn't believe it. It's a really fun experience, and it's actually quite interesting to see how this has really grown and how people are really resonating with their hometowns and their home teams. So again, a huge shout out to OS, who were the production company that made that event happen, as well as the Washington Justice. I really like that team there. They're a good group, and they really, really care about putting the best foot forward. Also have another event that will be coming up relatively soon. Really excited to share it with you all, but we're just going to have to leave it at that for the time being. It will be announced soon. Be on the lookout on my Twitter at GoldenboyFTW. Now let's get into the opening topic for today, because there's kind of something that's been brewing, and I'm really excited about it. We were supposed to get this years ago when Overwatch was released. And don't get me wrong, we kind of sort of did. But it feels like we're going to get another FPS renaissance, if you will. And the reason why I say an FPS renaissance is because it feels like we're seeing more of a focus for esports and FPS third-person shooters, like first-person shooters, third-person shooters, action shooters. We're seeing just more emphasis for this, partly because the game that's looming over everything is Project A by Riot. Everyone's really excited about that game. But then there are also other games, too, that are, I want to say flying under the radar, but they're certainly catching people off guard with how good they could potentially be and what their impact could be on the broader esports space. And those two games are Diabotical by the Good Studio and Rogue Company by Hi-Rez. Now, the reason why I'm talking about these games, and maybe you haven't heard of them before, and I assure you, this is not sponsored by either of those games. I mean, heck, I wish I'd get some money. But jokes aside, the reason why I'm interested in what these games could bring to the table is because they're giving us a little bit of the old, but mixing it in with a lot of new. And it's also coming at us with fresh ideas from individuals who lived the competitive shooter ecosystem experience. So the Good Studio, in case you guys aren't familiar, is ran by Too Good. And Too Good was a host and a commentator. He did a lot of events for, I believe it was like Dota and a few other FPS games, most notably like Quake. He came from that Arena FPS background. He is famously known as the guy that was told off by Gabe Newell, the head honcho of Valve. He said, "James is an ass and we'll never work with him again." It was a very famous line. And you know what? After that whole thing happened with him in Dota, he just went head first right into making his game Diabotical. And Diabotical has always been something that's been up and down as far as like whether or not it's going to come out or whether or not it's real. We knew it was like real, but we didn't really see much for it. And it took a really long time because it's independent. And now we're on the eve, as I'm recording this, of Diabotical getting its closed beta. It will be releasing on the 28th of February. And I'm interested. I'm genuinely interested to see what this game can do, because in case you aren't aware, Diabotical is an old school arena style FPS that harkens back to the days of Unreal Tournament or Quake. And those games have had a very up and down history when it comes to their relationship with esports, because I think across the board, everyone feels like arena FPS shooters are the most technical, the most skill driven. Like everyone feels like arena FPS games are just the pinnacle of competitive shooters, and for some even the competitive pinnacle for esports. Compare like StarCraft and Street Fighter, and I think you'd have games like 1v1 Quake duels right up there with those titles. So with this game coming out and it seemingly being very real, it opens the door for the opportunity for arena FPS games to get back into the limelight. Is Diabotical going to be the biggest game of all time? Truth be told, I genuinely cannot say yes or no. Had you told me that Epic Games would have changed the landscape of gaming forever with Fortnite, which was for the longest time shovelware, as far as we knew, we didn't even know that it was real, right? It had a lot of articles and hoopla, and even when the game came out, it didn't really draw any kind of attention. It was popular for like a week or so on Twitch, and then it really just died down. It wasn't until Battle Royale came out that Fortnite blew up. Again, if you would have told me that Fortnite was going to be the biggest game in the world at one point in time, I would have said you were crazy. But here we are. Fortnite has been a massive success, for better or worse, changed the gaming industry forever. So Diabotical could realistically be that game. And again, you're like, no, I don't think so. Well, let me go ahead and take it a step further. Escape from Tarkov, a very hardcore shooting game that has really just gone back to the days of Arma, trying its best to just be that tactical shooter that everyone wants and everyone's been craving. It was huge, and it's still doing really well for a lot of broadcasters on Twitch. It does very well on YouTube. It has that stickiness that people have been wanting. Now, again, this is where I'm going to bring Diabotical into this and say that I fear for the stickiness of that game, because it is, in fact, an arena FPS game. And if you played Quake Live, or if you played even Quake Champions, and you run into a player that is just God tier, you're gonna get slapped. If you run into a player that's just wildly mediocre and above average, you're gonna get slapped. Like the skill gap for those games are so absurdly wide that I fear that that is gonna create the very real situation that players will feel disconnected with the game. Now, what the Good Studio is trying to do to kind of offset that is to create a map making tool and to give the player a lot of control. And this kind of reminds me a little bit of what Ubisoft was doing with Shoot Mania. Mania Planet was making this game, and in case you guys don't know, Shoot Mania, look it up. I was a commentator for it. And their idea was that they thought that the community would make better maps than they did. Now, this isn't exactly what Diabotical is doing, but they're putting the tools in the hands of the players to allow them to be able to make things like maps and maybe custom game modes, and who knows. And perhaps that could be the thing that makes this game fun, because a game like Diabotical needs to be fun at its core. And I will be very blunt and say, for me personally, Quake Live was simply not fun. I appreciated it from a competitive standpoint because at the end of the day, I'm a student of esports and I love all games, but it just wasn't fun. I couldn't sit there for hours and engulf myself in this world because I was just getting destroyed. And I'm hoping that Diabotical kind of solves that problem. Maybe they don't do it exactly, but maybe they solve it in a sense that it creates at least more interest for the common player. And then there's Rogue Company, which this is a game that I've known a little bit about and I've known for a while because it's being developed by my good friend Scott Lucier, aka Gandhi. If you don't remember Gandhi, he is one of the, and I'm not talking about Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi was one of the best Halo players of all time, played for Team Carbon, won multiple championships. Guy's a legend in competitive Halo. He was a commentator for Call of Duty. The guy knows competitive gaming. He went over to Hi-Rez to work on, the likes of Paladins and Smite, and then he's working now on his own game, which is Rogue Company. And Rogue Company is shaping up to be something of a unique experience because it's adding the abilities, but the buy systems and the battle royale-esque elements of like dropping in, finding weapons, but it's round-based gameplay. It seems really, really interesting. And I think that it has the potential to really shake up the ecosystem. But, and I don't want to be that guy because I really love this studio. I love Hi-Rez and everything that they do. Big fan of Paladins, love Smite, hosted events for both games. Hi-Rez does have a tendency to tweak and change a little too much. Let's not forget what happened with Realm Royale. Realm Royale came out with a lot of hype. Everyone was so excited for this game. And then they took out a core element of the game, which was the forging system, making your own items. They took it out of the game over the weekend. And honestly, that's kind of when the game died for me. And it died for a lot of people as well. And then the numbers just continued to dip and dip and dip. And now Realm Royale is kind of hit or miss. It's still a great game. I boot it up from time to time and it's still pretty fun to play. But it's definitely not the game that I fell in love with when I was playing it when it first released. And that's because Hi-Rez has a very open development method for their games where they kind of design with the community. But, if I'm being honest, man, sometimes people really just want to be told what they like. And I know that sounds really weird, but sometimes people just want to be told, right? They want to be like, hey, this is the game and we'll change things within this game, but we're not going to change the game completely. So I think that for me, Rogue Company gets put on the side just for now until I start to see some concrete things for that game. But it still creates the conversation that people maybe are ready for more hardcore shooters to exist. And again, I haven't played Diabotical yet. I haven't played Rogue Company yet. But it feels like these games are being created for a generation that has started to play Fortnite and is now like, well, I'm really good at shooting in Fortnite. How do I take this to other games and add that skill that I have to these different titles? And perhaps that could be the transitional opportunity that a lot of these games were looking for, and to try and capitalize on what Fortnite and PUBG and H1Z1 created with these players, this new generation of players, that these are the titles that they know, but perhaps they're looking for something a little bit more. They're looking for something a little bit concrete rather than going back to the world of Battle Royale. Mind you, I could be all wrong on this entire thing, but what I know that I'm not wrong about is that Project A is probably one of the most hyped up shooters that are going to be coming out either this year or maybe 2021, I don't know, but it is 100% one of the most hyped up shooters that we have in our midst. And that is obviously because it's going to be Riot Games' second title, which is a huge deal, like their second IP. A lot of people are really excited for it. Hell, even I'm excited for it. I think that there's just going to be a lot of conversation about what this game brings to the table and also what this means for games like Counter-Strike. Again, another extremely hardcore game, but it is survived years and years and years. It has endured so many games releases in the past, and it still continues to be a stalwart title in esports' incredible history. I'm just genuinely excited to see what happens with FPS games moving forward, and just the shooter genre in general, because we're also getting a lot of interesting bits with Overwatch. The experimental server went out where they're now experimenting with the idea of a 1-2-3 composition where it's 1 tank, 2 supports, 3 DPS. That's very interesting. We're starting to see some change-ups here, and I wonder what this means for Overwatch 2. What does this mean for the Overwatch League? There's just so much up in the air right now, but it really is an exciting time to be a fan of shooting games. So that's basically where I'll end that one. And I'm also really excited for this episode because I'm going to be talking to Muddawg, the general manager for OpTic Gaming Los Angeles. Make sure you stick around to the end to listen to that one. Muddawg, an awesome guy. He came from 100 Thieves. He used to work at Activision. He used to be a pro player himself. I think that this just goes to show that these individuals that walk the walk and talk the talk back in the day are starting to see these opportunities, and these are the new minds that will be shaping esports for years and years to come. So we had a chat with Muddawg. It was pretty awesome, and hope you guys enjoy it. But first, let's talk about what went on last week and what's coming up next week. So the Call of Duty League took a trip to Atlanta, Georgia. I actually spent 2 weeks there filming Titan games, and the weather was not that kind. Hopefully it was better for my friends in Call of Duty, but ATL basically looked like an amazing event, and it also was an amazing win for the Atlanta Faze as they emerged victorious from their own homestand. First team to do it, not all that surprised given that I think in everyone's power rankings, even though Chicago's #1, Atlanta Faze are really the clear favorites. But if there are two teams that I think really impressed folks this weekend, it's one, the Minnesota Rokkr, which if you are a frequent listener of the podcast, you would know that I've been hyping up the Rokkr quite a bit. And that is because I genuinely think that this team of individuals that have just so much talent, but they don't have the biggest brands out there, their skill is unreal. Their teamwork is unreal. And Minnesota Rokkr are deadly. And also, huge shout out to Toronto Ultra, because Toronto took the Chicago Huntsmen 3-2. And that kind of leads me to what's going on with Chicago this weekend. It wasn't the cleanest weekend for the NRG Green Wall, or the NR Green Wall. I don't know. Anyway, it wasn't the easiest weekend for the Chicago Huntsmen. And granted, everyone is obviously allowed a off weekend, and when you talk about a team like Chicago Huntsmen with the talent that is on that roster, you know, it happens from time to time. On Saturday, they ended up going 3-2 against Toronto Ultra in a game that went the distance.
All up to Bance, they know the positioning, and Formal is out of there. He's thinking he knows where Bance is, he's pushing straight through, but Bance has read it with 10 seconds. All he needs to do is make the kill. He's popped the dead silence. Can he get the player off the bomb? Yes, he's done it! My goodness!
Whoa, they killed him! They killed him, they got the round!
Saved!
He couldn't get it done at the end! Bance was traded in the dying seconds.
And then Chicago went up against Minnesota Rokkr. While they were able to win out on that game, the Minnesota Rokkr, I mean, you know, again, 3-1, not bad. Taking a look at the score lines too, Search and Destroy ended 6-3, but the Minnesota Rokkr came out kicking in game one on St. Petrograd with a 250-107 win. And even when you look at the domination game, the Huntsmen won 153-145. I mean, that's down to the wire practically. It did come down to a gunrunner hard point where the Huntsmen ended up toppling the Rokkr 250-189. But when I look at the score results for that game, it really just tells me that it could have gone either way. Now, unfortunately, with what ended up happening with the Chicago Huntsmen, we didn't get the final that everyone was promised. We didn't get Chicago versus Atlanta. The script ended up falling through. And instead, we got Atlanta versus the Florida Mutineers.
20 seconds left.
6-point game. B's now being decapped. A huge 1v1's going to go down over towards C, but the kill feed is predominantly red. The decap towards B, but I think Florida realize they have to go. They have to push. They need to get everything. There's no time. There's no time at all left for Florida. And Atlanta Faze defend their city. They will take the Atlanta home series. A wonderful, wonderful performance from Faze. A 3-0 victory. And honestly, they deserve it. Rule year.
Florida Mutineers move on to the finals. Unfortunately for them, they get 3-0'd by the Atlanta Faze. And I think that kind of sets up that the Atlanta Faze are the #1 team in the league. Just the facts right now. They're the #1 team in the league. No one can stop them. The Tiny Terrors of Simp and Abizi have certainly been the most valuable pickup that you can possibly imagine for the Atlanta Faze. And if you are the ATL Faze organization, you feel like you definitely got your money's worth, because as it stands right now, Atlanta Faze are poised to win a championship. Do I want to go that far? Yeah, actually, I do. I do think that the Atlanta Faze are in a position that if the finals were tomorrow, they'd win. And guess what? When the finals are coming up, I think like in a few weeks, they'll win that too. I would be shocked if by the time we get to Toronto, which is the final homestand for the Call of Duty League, I would be shocked if Atlanta fall in the rankings. It would be unreal. But that does open the floodgates, though, because right now we're looking at the Florida Mutineers breaking into the top 5. Now, granted, not all teams attend the events, and we have to see what ends up happening with this rejuvenated Toronto Ultra and whether or not Dallas Empire, which was a team that made a lot of progress from Minnesota to London, will continue to make that progress as they go into their next event. There is certainly a lot of question marks, and that means that the LA home series is going to be that much more exciting. At the Los Angeles home series, you're going to have Group A with the LA Gorillas, Minnesota Rocker, OpTic Gaming LA, and the Seattle Surge, and Group B will be Atlanta Faze, Dallas Empire, Florida Mutineers, and then the New York Subliners. When I look at the groups here and who is really going to shine, I'm obviously going to tip my hat in Group A to Minnesota Rocker. But, and I'm not just saying this because Muddawg's on this week's episode of the show, I think OpTic Gaming LA could have the turnaround that they desperately need. This is a team that just needs to get a win under their belt. They are winless in this league. They are last place right now. They need a win. They're hungry, and they have to prove people wrong, because a lot of people are saying, haha, we were right. Group B, you got Atlanta Faze, Dallas Empire, Florida Mutineers, and the Subliners. And as much as this pains me to say, as a Subliners fan, I think the Subliners kind of get the ass end of the deal here. This really is a toss-up between what happens with the Dallas Empire and the Florida Mutineers. And if the Empire have really made this much progress with the way that they played from Minnesota to London and how much time they've had, perhaps this is the opportunity that Dallas was looking for. A win against Florida would be massive. But for Florida, I think they have their eyes set on the Atlanta Faze, because they lost 3-0, but they went up against the beast known as Faze. Perhaps they're going to be more prepared for this as we go into LA. Either way, though, the LA home series is pretty much looking to be a really exciting event. You can go to lahomeseries.com to get your tickets and also catch it on YouTube March 7th to the 8th. Next up, we go to Washington, D.C. for the Overwatch League, as the Washington Justice hosts the league this week. It was a awesome time. I was the MC. I was a host. I had a blast doing it. And the OWL will be taking a trip to Houston. Now, kind of reflecting on what's going on with Houston, it has been rather rough for the Outlaws. Firstly, they end up in Philadelphia for the Battle of Brotherly Love, hosted by the Philadelphia Fusion. And when they were there, this was the first time we were going to see the Outlaws take the stage. They then went up against a brand new Florida Mayhem. This team has just completely changed everything around, and they're a top contender right now. Houston, obviously, looking for that win, and they kind of ran into the path of Mayhem. Then they ran into the path of the Justice, who are also a really, really good team right now. So Houston had 2 rough games back to back. Then you think to yourself, okay, Houston, you went up against 2 difficult teams. The Mayhem have a full Korean roster, talented across the board, and you also went up against the Justice, who got Corey, Stratus. These guys are going to stun on you all day. Maybe you'll be able to pick up the win against the Boston Uprising. Well, apparently winning was the most difficult challenge for both of these teams on that day, because while the score does say 3-2, we had a lot of draws.
Beautiful, but can you really run the same strat twice?
Murph's trying to use, connects onto the backline. Boston, the aggression is there. Gonna be answering for Blizzard as well. And that kind of speed, that kind of aggression has just caught them off guard. 5 seconds remaining. Can anyone from the Outlaws touch this one?
Jexay is in position. He's going to be able to get the touch. He forces out the overtime, but everybody else from Houston is so far away. The boom coming out from Swimmer as well.
No one's there. The Boston Uprising win it out in map 7, stealing away the hopes and dreams of the Houston Outlaw.
I mean, top to bottom, this game was ridiculous, right? You get Temple of Anubis 2-2 drawed out. You get Blizzard World 3-3, that's drawn out. you end up getting a back and forth game, and you just didn't think that was possible. Boston Uprising, though, do manage to one-up the Houston Outlaws, and they pick up a critical victory, because I don't think either of these teams could afford to have lost that match. And unfortunately, well, the check's out for the Houston Outlaws as they go into their own homestand winless. Not looking good. And it seems like it ain't going to get all that better for the Outlaws either, because they're going to be going up against the London Spitfire, who just defeated the Philadelphia Fusion. Philadelphia Fusion, I would say in power rankings, certainly higher than the Outlaws. And then they're going to go up against the Toronto Defiant, another team that's looking really good right now. The Defiant had one heck of a matchup against the Fusion that went 3-2, and it really came down to the small details and how Philadelphia are simply just riding this momentum right now and being able to clutch up when they really, really need to. So the Toronto Defiant London Spitfire, who London also just beat the Washington Justice in Washington, D.C., it ain't going to be pretty for the Outlaws. I wish it would have been the case, but right now it just seems like things are just not working out for them. And I also think they're having a hard time in the DPS role and also in the tank role too. They have to figure out what they want to do there and how the main tank is going to play into this composition. It's certainly... There are just a lot of question marks for the Outlaws right now. As a fan of Overwatch, I just can't wait to watch, because we got a lot of games that are going to be very, very engaging for viewers. For example, we get to see the New York Excelsior take on the Florida Mayhem. How is that going to go? I mean, who knows? And then the Paris Eternal go up against the Atlanta Reign. That's going to be another fantastic matchup. I can't wait. We got good games across the board in Houston, and you can go ahead and check that out on YouTube Gaming, youtube.com/Overwatch League, I believe. And also tickets are still available for the Houston Outlaws homestand. Go to hou.gg to get your tickets.
Given Liquid things to think about. There's a HE next to doubles up. This could be it. This could be everything now for G2. Naf and Twist trying to move in position, and Naf is the next to fall, leaving Twist in a 1-on-5. He hasn't lost any health early on in that encounter and does get a second frag, but there's Jax with the AK-47. G2 booked their spot in the semis, joined by Astralis, and Liquid gonna have to play that extra game in the quarters. What a performance.
And then finally, while all this is going on, you got IEM Katowice 2020. This is known as the motherland of events for Counter-Strike. This is the big Mama Jamma. And this tournament has been top to bottom unfreaking believable. One, Cloud9 gets exited early from the competition, rip the dream, but it is what it is. Then you get Astralis that they didn't really have the best Blast Premier, so it's nice to see Astralis really be able to bounce back the way that they have.
And now Crimson JW have to try and save Fnatic once again. It's another Deagle frag. JW 1v5, and it's a Deagle to round it off. Astralis 16-8. Take it 2-0 and continue their streak of top 4 finishes only at Katowice.
But I think for me and for a lot of folks, the big one is G2 Esports, because G2 Esports has, I think at one point in time they were considered one of the best teams in the world, but for them to be able to, come back with the familiar names that we all know and love and still perform at an incredibly high level has been extremely impressive. They defeated 100 Thieves 2-0, Mouse Sports 2-1, and then Team Liquid 2-0. So Group A and Group B have been decided, and that sets us up with our matches, which will be Fnatic versus 100 Thieves, and then Na'Vi going up against Team Liquid. Again, great matches. 100 Thieves holding it down for the Oceania region. Meanwhile, Fnatic, I mean, this is, you know, a team of legends, Golden, JW, Flusha, Crims, like you got some talent across the board. And then you have Na'Vi versus Team Liquid, another matchup that I'm excited for. Simple, by the way, according to HLTV.org's statistics, is currently playing at a 1.26 rating. Like, it's over the past 3 months, that is just crazy. That is just shenanigans how good Simple is. That is not the matchup that, you know, this Team Liquid roster would have wanted, but it's a matchup that they're going to get. That is certainly going to be one to tune into, and that will be happening on Friday. It's a best of 3 for the quarterfinals. Winner of that, I believe, will move on to face off against Astralis, and then the winner of Fnatic 100 Thieves will face off against G2, who are comfortably waiting in the semifinals after winning their upper final games in Group A and B. Of course, you can check out all of the action this Friday when IEM Katowice continues with their quarterfinals games. This will be taking place on ESL CSGO. So ESL_CSGO on Twitch and ESL Counter-Strike on YouTube. You can also check it out in various other languages as well, if English doesn't particularly float your boat. Lots of games ahead. It is going to be a sick weekend for esports. But now it's time for a conversation with the general manager of OpTic Gaming, Muddawg. Now, if you guys don't know Muddawg, I mentioned it at the beginning of the show, but Muddawg has been around the space for such a long time now. He was a competitive player in Call of Duty for many years, transitioned over to working at Activision on the dev side, but also on the CWL competitive side. He also went to 100 Thieves to be the head of esports for them there, and then moved over to Immortals Gaming Club to manage the OpTic Gaming LA franchise for the Call of Duty League. Safe to say that this guy has so much experience under his belt, and on top of that, so much success under his belt. It's been a long journey for this guy, and Muddawg has really been a champion for Call of Duty esports, but he's also just been someone that I think if you're looking to get into the industry, look at what Muddawg did and how he managed to accomplish it, because this guy is truly something else. So I had a really good time talking to him and getting his thoughts on everything relating to OpTic Gaming LA, the CDL, the situation with the Chicago Huntsmen, OpTic Gaming fans, and so much more. Enjoy. I'm now joined by the OpTic Gaming LA GM, the one and only, my good friend, Muddawg, a guy I've known for many years. Muddawg, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing well, man. Thank you for having me today. I'm excited to catch up with you and chat.
I know, it's been so dang long. You've actually had an incredible career, I'll say. You were a you were a pro. Competed at a very high level. You had a lot of respect from your peers. You transitioned into dev work, working at, what was it, Sledgehammer or Infinity Ward?
Yeah, I worked at Sledgehammer for a year and then went to Activision.
Then went to Activision proper. And then from there, you left Activision, went to join Nadeshot and 100 Thieves, which was just, one, I was super happy for you when I saw it, but also, two, I think that, you know, just showed like how much you brought to the table at Activision, that you were able to get poached essentially to join 100 Thieves, which was and has been an incredible organization. And now you're at Immortals Gaming Club working for OpTic Gaming and OpTic Gaming LA. What a journey you've had, man. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's something that's absolutely wild. I never thought I'd be just even in the path of esports and competitive gaming, never mind the type of path I've taken within the space. But yeah, I'm extremely grateful. Like all three of those companies in IGC, 100 Thieves, and Activision are wonderful companies to work for. And I learned a lot from some like the senior people I worked with at each of those two, which is great because that's what's going to help me develop professionally.
Yeah, for sure. That is a resume to put together, and it's great. So let's talk about that transition from 100 Thieves to IGC, because 100 Thieves, you were the coach or the general manager? I'm blanking.
So I was technically the head of esports operations. I was GMing the COD team, but then I also put together the Fortnite program, worked on Apex Legends, and then supported and did like operational stuff for League of Legends. But I definitely wasn't like building rosters in that game.
Got it. Got it. So you had quite the background, and then IGC comes to you. They say, listen, we got OpTic Gaming. Do you want to come here and work on LA esports for Call of Duty? How was that conversation like, if you don't mind diving into that?
Yeah, I mean, to take a step back a little bit, like as the Call of Duty season was wrapping up, a lot of the franchises were approaching me and talking to things, and I was really transparent with Nate and John Robinson throughout the process as well. They were great with giving me advice of things to do, and they were really happy to like see me get some of these opportunities to potentially move on. And they sort of call me 100 Thieves first, like true alumni of like, someone who helped build a business a lot there and then went on to the next step. So John Robinson, who I trust a lot, he talked with me about some of like the orgs and their leadership of who I would want to partner with, and he said a ton of amazing things about Ari Segal, who is the CEO of IGC now. So I met with him and some of the other people from the leadership team. We had like a really good 2-hour lunch, and then they're located like 10 minutes from us. So it was really cool that 100 Thieves was so supportive and understanding of my transition. And obviously I've been in Call of Duty for 10 years. So it's one that made sense, as hard as it was to leave a good group of friends and a great company like that. But it was a really smooth transition. IGC is full of some great people. So I'm really excited about how things turned out.
Yeah, I actually have nothing but praise for IGC, because I worked with them for the first time at the LA Valiant Kit Kat rivalry weekend event. I had to say that like a million times that weekend, which is funny. So I worked with them for the rivalry weekend for OWL last season. I mean, the whole crew, top to bottom. This was the events team, mind you, that I was working with. I mean, they were fantastic. It was like a breath of fresh air. Not to say anything negative about any of the other teams I've worked with, because this season I've worked with the Fusion, I worked with the Washington Justice. Yeah, the IGC crew is great. That's why, I think that when I saw them getting so much hate from the OpTic loyal of, Hex's OpTic, quote unquote, it bothered me. It genuinely did, because this, IGC is a great organization with a lot of hardworking people who have a deep and diverse background in all of esports. And I know that you've dealt with it as well. And it also baffles my mind how some fans literally are still like, if you're not a fan, I wouldn't follow, right? But yet they still follow just to bash, which makes zero sense to me. But whatever, stranger things have happened in this world. How has it been for you personally having to deal with that kind of negativity? Because I've known you for so long, and you're such a positive guy. You've always been that dude that you've always got a smile on your face, even when things are down. You always keep your head up. This is obviously like a challenge. It's a challenge. How are you dealing with it?
Yeah, it certainly is a challenge. I mean, first, to take a step back there, like I don't blame the fans who are upset for being upset at IGC. Like, while Infinite, that group, bought the brand before and we are the ones holding it, like I understand from a fan's point of view, you were looking at things at the brand level. You're not looking at it at the ownership level.
Yeah.
So while the rational thought is that like it doesn't make sense there, I completely get it from the fans' point of view. It's something that is new to them, and they sort of had their baby taken away from them. But I think it's a really interesting challenge. As you said, I'm a really positive person, so I think it helps sort of counteract a lot of that negativity. But it doesn't bother me. It actually motivates me a lot, just really to build the best product that I can in terms of a team and a brand and what type of content we're putting out. I really prided myself on the ability to hopefully bring a championship roster to the city of LA. So we are a long way off from that currently, but that is the long-term goal. But yeah, it's stuff that it doesn't get to me or the players by any means. There are certainly some comments that make us laugh and everything. But again, at the end of the day, like I understand that we're not that traditional OpTic, and I just am trying to build, something positive with the brand going forward.
And it seems as if, with everything that I've seen, that has been the message, that has been the objective. I was actually really impressed by that video promoting the home series, because it was funny. It was genuinely funny. You had Aches talking trash to Slasher, or actually not really talking trash, or exchanging platitudes, and I really enjoyed it, because anyone who knows those two knows that is just not how they are, which made it like that much more hilarious and enjoyable. So you mentioned a team bringing a championship to LA. Obviously, a lot easier said than done in its current state. The league, very competitive right now. OpTic Gaming LA, unfortunately, sitting at the bottom of the standings as it currently is. I know that's a tough pill to swallow, for you. No CDL points currently But to be fair, you have had some pretty difficult matches. For example, in Minnesota, you face off against Paris. You lost 3-2. Pretty competitive effort. Then you went up against Chicago, who at the time everyone's saying was white hot, best team in the league, lost 3-0. Obviously, that was a very passionate battle between Chicago Huntsmen and OpTic and, that whole history there. But then we shift focus to Atlanta. You face off against the number 2 and number 1 finishing teams there. You lose to Florida 3-1, lose to ATL 3-0. You basically faced off against the top 4 of the top 5 teams in the league right now. Not easy at all to have to deal with. What are your thoughts on how the season has started so far for OGLA?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely wasn't an easy start with that, but it's something that we never want to use as an excuse. We built this roster to win championships. We have 5 very, very capable players on the roster. And it's a learning experience. We're figuring out what works best with the team. There's a lot of other challenges this year that come with franchising that teams haven't dealt with in the past. So, for example, I have TJ and Dashy who have never lived away from home for the first time. So there's so many other variables that come with something like that on top of worrying about the team and how they're performing game itself. So I'm learning a ton about like managing personalities and really helping be like a mentor to some of these younger players growing up. And yeah, we're making a few changes in terms of roles going into this event to try to, we obviously have to do something different. 0 points, last in the league, completely unacceptable.
Yeah.
So we're going to try moving Slasher back to his main AR role and having Dashy play the SMG role. And it's actually something that we tried like about a month ago for a few days. We didn't give it a full, shot, but now that Dashy understands the game better from a high level and a macro understanding, the ability to adapt and change to a role is much easier now. Like changing to a role you haven't played before while you're also simultaneously learning the game, it's just like too much to process at once for a lot of players. So now that we have a good grasp on the basics of the game, we can sort of try some new things out there and hopefully be more effective with it.
Why did it take so long for Dashy to come around with the game? If you don't mind me asking.
Oh, I think it wasn't Dashy specifically. I think it was our whole team.
Okay.
One, candidly, to start, when the game came out, the players weren't big fans of it, and they were really abrasive in terms of just accepting and learning the game. And I think it's part of the reason I put ATL in such a good position right now is, those players took the mindset of this is how the game is, whether we like it or not. And a lot of people will complain about things like spawns. It's like whether the spawn makes sense or is a quote unquote stupid spawn, there's a reason it happened. So I think we struggled to flip our mindset. We finally did, about a month and a half ago. But yeah, I just think it was a team thing in terms of understanding the game, not just Dashy.
I totally understand. No, I didn't mean to single out Dashy. You had mentioned it. I think it makes a lot of sense. We play a new game every single year. Some games, honestly, have a higher favorability than others, right? Like I think we all kind of look extremely fondly on Black Ops 2. We still look fondly upon that game till this day because of what it did for competitive Call of Duty, how it created the true roles that we started to see, hard points introduction, how score streaks were used. There were just a lot of things that were just done very well in that game from a fan's perspective, right? You obviously working behind the scenes as a part of the crew bringing the game to life and now being in the esports forefront, it also gives you kind of added perspective as well onto like what it is that you need as a GM for your players to expect moving in, because the reality is this season will end and we will move on to a new game. So how does that transition over is going to be a big thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, one of the things that's really different from other esports, as you said, is with the annual title, and when I say we, I mean me and the other GMs, we were building rosters without knowing what to expect from the game. So like last year, for example, it ended up being 1 main assault rifle, 2 assault rifle players that were sort of in like a flex role, and then 2 SMG players. And this year it's a 1-4 split. So a lot of times you're adapting to your roster composition on the fly based off of things that you find out 2 months into the game. And it's the same with talent evaluation. Like a lot of, little 18-year-old kids who couldn't play before come up in each title, but you can't really recognize them ahead of, when they turn 18 or when the game comes out, because people just get better at different games. They, rise to stardom in different fashions.
Yeah.
So it's a really dynamic esport, and it's a lot of, adjusting on the fly and learning from mistakes. I think it's really important to be very, humble with your mistakes and recognize when you messed up, because if you don't learn from them in this industry, people are just going to blow by you.
Yeah. And speaking of learning from mistakes and growing, one player on your team that, I want to talk about is JCap, because he has been, I mean, you talk about the OGs of OGs. I was competing in Black Ops 1 and he was out there, killing the game, right? JCap has been in this for such a long time. How is he doing with all of this? Obviously playing for an OpTic gaming roster that has a lot of diversity in what they can bring to the table, but not really getting all the pieces together when it comes to event time. How's a player and a veteran like JCap doing in this situation?
He's handling like I'd call it, the quote unquote negative state that the team is, just losing in general, the best out of anyone. He's been here before. He knows that seasons can, turn around very, very quickly. And he's just being like a good motivating factor for the other kids. Again, when you build rosters, people think about pure kill death ratio, and they don't always think about other things such as the personality factors and managing things like that. So he brings a lot of balance to our team.
Yeah.
And he's keeping us very grounded so far and helping us stay focused.
Yeah. And then one thing that Call of Duty is now getting that didn't really happen before was coaching. It was never a thing. I mean, for Christ's sake, Maven and Gandhi coached 2 teams at an event one time. Like, really, like, what are you getting out of that? Love him to death, but geez. Mr. X was a coach, quote unquote. He yelled at people.
Yeah, big quotations on that
one. Big quotations, right? They're going to be so mad at me. The coaching has changed fundamentally now. I think we started to see it last season. I noticed it more so when Bobble got put into that EG roster. And you know how he is. He's very ones and twos numbers guy, very focused. And we're starting to see that more and more now. Crowder as well, not to take anything away from him. Obviously, TP, what they did was fantastic. So now that we're in this full phase of like every team has a coach, and some teams, I think all teams have analysts as well. How has that changed the game for these rosters? How's that changed the game for competitive Call of Duty in general from this point forward? Because it's a huge addition that Call of Duty desperately needed for a very long time.
Yeah, I think it's just another touch to the additions that franchising are adding. Teams have budgets and support systems to be able to actually employ a coach. And coaches are getting, as you touched on, they're way more impactful than they were a few years ago because of the quality candidates that are in the position. I still think some coaches are pretty far ahead of others in terms of how they operate and things they do, because coaching in Call of Duty, again, since it's an annual title, it's a very unique thing. Like in a game like Counter-Strike or League of Legends, these coaches have been around for 10 years. Like, there are obviously little things that adapt and change with the game, but from an overall holistic point of view, you're coaching the same thing. Whereas Call of Duty, the coach is actually like learning the game with the players. And I'd almost argue that I would argue it's way easier to learn a game playing it, even though when you're in CODcast, you can see all the triangles. There's something about processing information in the first person when you're in the mix.
Yeah.
So a coach's job in Call of Duty isn't necessarily to tell the players exactly how to play. I think a lot of it is, beside the personality management, is like creating constructive discussion that is going to help those 5 players get on the same page and talk about what they want to do with things. Because at the end of the day, the coach isn't talking during the match. So you need to make sure those 5 players have 100% alignment on what to do in every situation thrown at them. And a lot of that is just watching the scrimmages, seeing where a mistake was made, and then getting them to have a constructive discussion about it.
Yeah, it is a different beast, right? And how do, because in Overwatch, for example, one of the players that's always talked about is kind of like the 7th man was Spree for the Houston Outlaws. He was like that motivator. He was always the guy that was there with them. How have, folks like Chino or Gunjar, how have they added to that conversation as well?
I mean, in terms of just base morale, having Chino around is amazing. He is one of the funniest people I've ever met. He is the nicest person I've ever met in gaming or the community. Like, I have nothing negative to say about him. And on top of it, he adds like a lot of random additional value. Like when we had our matches in Atlanta this weekend, the night before, he typed up a little document where he watched teams breakouts and talked about certain spots they play in Search and Destroy, just giving us like any little bit of information that could potentially put us over the top. Obviously, didn't end up winning the matches, but just to see our 6-man take that level of interest and be that engaged, it's really positive to see overall.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man, and it is helpful because you just have another opinion out there that is contributing in a positive way to the conversation. It really does bring in, as you mentioned, a random, unexpected element to the table that I don't think a lot of people really comprehend at this point in time. Looking ahead though, obviously last place right now, it's gonna, we're hoping for a change. I know you are. And hopefully that starts in Los Angeles, because March 7th through the 8th, we will be going to the LA Home Series hosted by the Gorillas and OpTic Gaming, a first for the league. It's only been 3 events, but this one hosted by 2 teams rather than it just being one, which I kind of like that. First match is going to be against the Los Angeles Gorillas. Good old-fashioned battle for LA, as we called it in Overwatch. We're going to have to find something new to call it in Call of Duty. How's that preparation been? I know that they're kind of in a similar boat as you guys right now with figuring out how to manage their veterans and how to really bring this team that has shown signs of promise to a better position. How's the squad going into LA next week, or not going into, but going to be in their own hometown next week?
Yeah, I mean, I think going into the match, we're really just focusing on our own gameplay and improving what we can do. They haven't announced anything publicly, and I don't know too much about what's going on, but I've heard rumors that the Gorillas are looking at making some roster changes. So we don't necessarily want to prepare directly for them because we don't know what to expect. So, we have so many, we've been making so many mistakes and so many like basic issues that we just need to focus on our game. But we're really excited to play them and, sort of kick off this, for lack of a better term, Battle of LA.
Yeah.
And we're just excited for the event. As you said, like we've had a tough schedule so far, and my players will be the first to discredit that. They don't care who they're playing. Like they look at themselves as 0-4, and they could have lost to they feel like they lost the 4 worst teams in the game, essentially. It doesn't matter who they lose to, they're not happy about it. But for me as a GM, I'm excited that we have definitely an easier group this time around. In theory, hopefully that doesn't come back to bite me in the ass there. But hopefully some of our preparation paired with, not playing Atlanta for our first match. Like, I just think our guys need to get some confidence under their belt and, get a win and get rolling from there. You're not going to go from 12th to first place. And I know that's how my players, especially like Slasher, wants to look at things, but it's going to be a progression. Like we're not going to go from being the worst to the best team in the league in one event. It's going to take some time. We're going to climb up the rankings in general. But again, this is a franchise esport now. It's a process. I'm already thinking about things, year over year. Whereas in the past, it was like, how do I win the next event in a month?
Yeah. It's again a whole new world. Your group in LA will be the Gorillas, obviously, Minnesota Rocker, who, I'm going to be very upfront. I think that they're probably one of the better teams in the league right now. They're looking phenomenal.
I think other than Atlanta, they have the best teamwork. They're a really, really well put together team.
I just feel like everyone's sleeping on them, and at some point they got to stop. You got to wake up. Then you also have Seattle Surge that are going through some hardships of their own. Possible 100%. What is it going to take for this team to be able to break out of this group? What is going to be the defining factor? What is it that fans should be looking out for when they tune in on YouTube next week to see OpTic Gaming LA take on the Rocker, the Surge, and the Gorillas to get out of Group A?
I mean, the most important thing I think for us is just getting a hot start and actually beating the Gorillas. We need that momentum. We need that confidence. Minnesota is a really strong team. I'm confident that I think we can beat most of the teams at the moment, and definitely by the time champs comes around, we'll be competing with anyone. But Rocker is going to be the toughest other team in that group. I'm pretty confident we can beat Gorillas and Seattle. So getting that hot start, getting that confidence, I think is going to be what we need to do to make it out.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, you would have faced off against every top 5 team in the CDL, finishing up Minnesota Rocker. Went up against Huntsman, Faze, Legion, Mutineers. And yeah, I mean, you know, the challenges are certainly there, but it's going to be fun to watch for sure. Where can people catch the LA Home Series, man? Because it seems like it's going to be really exciting.
Definitely going to be on youtube.com/Call of Duty, and then also LAHomeSeries.com. Head there, get your tickets. March 7th and 8th at the Shrine Expo Hall. It's a really cool venue. It looks really awesome from outside. You saw some shots of it in the Slasher Aches piece.
Yeah.
But yeah, hope to see everyone there.
Yeah, man. I cannot wait to watch. It's going to be super fun. And dude, you know, one, obviously, as a friend, I'm proud of you for everything you've done in your career. And two, you know, as a professional, I think that if there's one person who I'm okay with, and I said this on Twitter, and I when it was announced, and I say it to this day, if there's one person who I'm happy to see take up a prestigious mantle like OpTic Gaming that isn't Hector, you certainly are someone that does stand at the top of that list because of your candor, your professionalism. It's unmatched, man.
Thank you, my man. I appreciate all the kind words. Great catch up with you. Love you as always.
Hell
and
yeah.
I hope to see you at our event, man.
Yeah, man. I'll buy a ticket.
See you
Thanks,
there.
brother.
Get you a nice VIP pass. Have you up in the upper lounge. Be a great time.
Yeah, you know, or just GA. We'll see. Thanks, bud.
Thanks again for having me, man. Have a great one.
So there you have it. Thank you so much to Muddawg for taking the time to talk to me. I know that things are crazy with the LA Home Series coming up, and also being a general manager for this OpTic Gaming roster certainly ain't easy, but if there's one guy who's up to the task, it certainly is Muddawg. So that's going to do it for That Esports Podcast, and be on the lookout for a special announcement that will actually be out today. So again, wink, wink, check out the Twitter at GoldenboyFTW. Really excited about that. But, you know, as always, thank you all so much for checking out the show. I really appreciate it. This is a 100% independent podcast. I love that I get to do this, and I love that I can share my passion for so many games to all of you folks. So thank you once again for tuning in. If you do want to support us, feel free to follow on Spotify. Also, rate and review on Apple Podcasts and wherever you choose to listen to your podcast goodness. My name is Goldenboy, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.